We'll just wait another minute or two before getting started. I want to give a heads up that closed captions are available tonight. So if you are interested in having closed captioning, you can access it by clicking the CC button in the bottom of the Zoom bar for live transcript. Okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Before we begin, a few more logistical items. This panel event will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. Only our panelists will be pinned for the discussion and visible on the recording. However, any audience questions will be on the audio, and those will be recorded and uploaded on the YouTube as well. So if you're not comfortable with displaying your name or being on a video, if you're asking questions, then feel free to turn your video off during the Q&A portion at the end. For now, you can drop questions in the chat and we'll make sure we get to them at the end. Before we delve into tonight's discussion, I'd like to take time to acknowledge that Bluebonnet Data is an organization of individuals residing on the traditional homelands of the people of the Munsee, Lenape, Pawtucket, Massachusetts, Kickapoo, Umanos, Tawakoni, Wichita, Lipan-Apache, and Chickasaw nations. Our panelists tonight are individuals residing on the homelands of the Ochitashakowin, Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ramaytush, Ohlone, Mawekma, Coast Salish, Stillaguamish, Muckleshoot, and Suquamish nations. As a remotely based organization with employees and partners who are geographically scattered across these lands, we acknowledge that Native and Indigenous peoples are the rightful stewards of the lands that we reside on, and that there is a deep-rooted and continuous relationship between them and their territories. We acknowledge our history of colonization and genocide of Native and Indigenous people and their lands. The cities that we reside in are home to over 436,481 American Indians today. With that being said, I will start by introducing myself and our other guests tonight. I'm Becca Blais, the Executive Director and co-founder of Bluebonnet Data. If you aren't familiar with Bluebonnet, we are a political nonprofit focused on recruiting and matching data talent to down-ballot progressive campaigns through a tech fellowship and data fellowship program. I'll be facilitating tonight's discussion, which we've intentionally themed Tech Founders. We want to center tonight's conversation around how women and non-binary people are at the forefront of the intersection of innovation, human interaction, and technology. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed guests. Kaylee McHugh is the CEO of ChattyKathi, a digital platform that strengthens belonging within communities by facilitating fun and insightful conversations among small groups. ChattyKathi works with businesses, universities, intensive training programs, and membership organizations to ensure every member of a community feels like they belong and can openly share who they truly are. Kaylee has a background in literature and software development and is currently pursuing a master's degree in technology management from the University of Denver. Ari Trujillo Wessler is the co-founder and CEO of OpenField. With nearly 20 years of experience to her credit, she is a nationally recognized field director and engineer. She has been the National Director of Grassroots Power Building at the Sierra Club, Deputy National Director for the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign, and Director of Data and Engineering for Wellstone Action, among others, before co-founding OpenField. An alumni of the University of Texas at Austin, Ari is non-binary Afro-Chicana who hails from the east side of San Jose. Emily is the co-founder of OpenField, a veteran of several political campaigns over the last 10 years. Emily is a national data expert, having built a national voter file from scratch. She has been a key member of the data teams of both TargetSmart, the 2016 Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, the 2012 Obama presidential campaign, and Nation Builder before co-founding OpenField. So hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. We'll start out with a couple of introductory questions so everybody can get to know you, beginning with something we'd like everybody to answer of what does being a tech founder mean to you? We can start with Emily.
So hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. being a tech founder, to me, I think we were talking about this earlier, is having to kind of like step outside of kind of the nitty gritty and the day to day of what we're doing, and really kind of focus on why and who we're doing it for. And so for me, being a tech founder is actually how is what I'm doing and how is what I'm building helping to serve our customers and to serve the people that we are trying to help. And so that's kind of how I view it on a day-to-day basis, of trying to like pull myself out of kind of the operational aspects of it and actually focus on why we're doing what we're doing, and having that be kind of like our guiding light. Popcorn it, or will you call in someone?
Anybody can jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, Emily, I completely agree. I think being a tech founder is really, it's giving yourself and the people that you're building something for the opportunity to experience something great and experience something that you don't think people have seen before. You know, I think you become a tech founder because you see a need and you see no one else filling it, and you think you can be that person to help. And so, yeah, always making sure that the people that you're building things for really come first.
I think it comes down to, like, I've been talking a lot to investors about like value proposition, and like it actually comes down to me for what an organizer who I admire very much was saying this evening, which is it's all about time. Like, we don't get enough time with our people, with our communities, to do the things that we want to. And so for me, being a tech founder is allowing folks to literally reclaim their time in their lives so that they can focus on doing the things that are actually the thing they want to do and are trying to accomplish, and that brings them joy. But there's a lot of red tape and management between here and the thing they're trying to manifest. And so being a facilitator of people being able to live the lives they want, and are trying to live, is like primarily what I think about these days.
Ari, I think that's a really wonderful point, because so many people see technology as, oh, this, it's kind of you like, it's a silver bullet and that's what we should be striving for, but really it's a protection of people's time and inclusion and all of those other types of efforts. So that's awesome. I'd love to have a follow-up question to that for everyone to answer, of in your careers and especially with the organizations that you've founded, what are you most proud of?
Let's go back around the circle. Honestly, just that we did it, or that we decided to sit down and actually start a company. I think that when you think about it, in kind of the bigger picture, like, it is pretty audacious to sit here, especially as like two women, to say, hey, we're going to start this tech company, we're going to do it ourselves, and we're not going to seek, you know, outside engineering, outside help, at least in the beginning, and that we just sat down and made the choice and went for it, and that we've been able to so easily work together. Ari and I had been friends and worked together for 6 or 7 years before we started OpenField. And so I think I'm most proud of just the fact that we decided to do it, and just have like put our all into getting to where we are right now. Kaylee.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. So part of my reason for becoming a tech founder was, in addition to wanting to build a really wonderful product, it was also to try and build a really good internal culture within my team. I had had a few experiences in the past where that wasn't really the case. And I just always thought to myself that, you know, if I'm given this opportunity and I end up becoming just like that, this isn't something I should be doing. And so what I'm really proud of so far is my co-founder and I have tried really hard to figure out what those internal values will be, giving people flexibility, giving them equity in the company, just trying to really create a culture of listening and bonding, is actually something that I'm the most proud of, because that, I think, was one of the biggest pain points for me and one of the biggest reasons why I ended up in this position.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most proud of is I think somewhere between courage and audacity that it takes to do this, to just be like, our last conversation, someone was like, I have already been told no twice. And I was like, that is totally possible. And that's still our stance and our response, right? Is like, our job, and the thing I'm most proud of, is that we really focus on standing on the edge of what's possible and then like pushing from there, in a way that isn't the same as like trying to be defensive of like an architecture or something like that. We get to just kind of take a stab in the dark and give it a try. And sometimes it works out great. And sometimes you're up until 4 a.m, like pushing code directly to production because it didn't work great. But like it always, the thing that it requires more than anything is the courage to give it a shot. And I think it's pretty fair to say we really haven't shied away from any of like the big shots in the dark that have kind of been requested of us as a part of doing this work.
That's amazing. I think audacity is such a great word that both of you have brought up now, and being able to bring that to your organization and to build something with it is pretty inspiring. So with both OpenField and ChattyKathi, when you were starting these organizations or creating this technology, really growing the idea, what was the aha moment that led you to believe, yes, I'm the right person to bring this into the world? Really, how was that early founder feeling for you?
I feel like I'm not the person that should go first on this because Ari and I sat down, this was about 3 years ago, having brunch, and it was the day after the funeral of our previous boss at the startup that we were at. And we both just felt like Ari had been asking around, like, are you guys, to all these other companies, are you going to build this thing that we're looking for as a user? And they were saying no. So we sat down and had brunch, and we both missed building something, right? We both missed being in the weeds of something and not just working for a company or working for a campaign, but actually like, I want to get my hands dirty. Like I had building the national voter file and actually be able to be a part of something. And so I think that for us and for me, the real kind of, I guess, aha moment was us sitting down and just making that choice, like, hey, like, why don't we try and do this? And then I think really once we started having those conversations, users that, potential users and people that we knew really being inspired by the idea. And so I think for me, it was just kind of those beginning few months where I don't know if this was just like either blind ambition or just like being naive to think like, hey, we're just going to do this, it's going to work. And then getting the call from HTL, which I think for us was our big, like, oh, okay, like we're actually going to do this. And HTL, for those that don't know, is our accelerator where we met Becca and the Bluebonnet team, and kind of were our first backers. And so I know it's not like a product aha moment or a customer aha moment, but it was just kind of the first, I guess, like 6 months from sit down of idea to, hey, this is actually a business we're incorporating. We got our first check, and kind of the momentum that we've taken from there. But it really stemmed from Ari coming and us having brunch and being like, hey, let's do something.
Yeah, that's super cool. Ari, do you want to go next, since you want to talk about the other side of the brunch before I talk about ChattyKathi?
Sure. Yeah, I think describing it as like a continuous like 6 months of like, oh, right. And it does sound very hopeful when you describe it that way, but it was filled with like giant pockets of terror. Like when we got news of our first investment, right? And we were like, we don't have a bank account. And so like stalling in order to be able to get the things we needed to even accept the first money we accepted as a company, right? Like, I think is the thing. But I think honestly, what came of it more than anything, and this is not going to sound super healthy, so I don't recommend it for other people, but it's true, is that I was really powered by resentment and being told no. Like I, in particular, really believe, right, that there is nothing wrong with organizing, right? Like OpenField is a piece of organizing tech. And for a really long time, organizing has been shaped by the technology we have access to, in a way that, sales is not in the same way, right? Like, and so I felt really strongly about having identified a use case which I knew worked and wanting to have support for it. And when I talked to all of my friends, a bunch of people with lots of power and influence and money, and they were like, oh no, we have nothing, and no one's coming to save us. I felt really strongly when I was told no by the folks I called to be like, yo, can you make this thing happen? That one, they were lying to me, which I don't really care for, but also that they told me something wasn't technically possible, and I kind of went out to prove them wrong. And so I don't think anything ever was like I'm meant to do this thing, but I did kind of end up with I am responsible for making this happen. And I think that is continuously where I live, right? Is like, I don't feel like I am particular and the dude, but I do feel like I'm the dude who is left with the thing. And if I don't see it through, no one else is going to, and that's been proven to me already, right? And so it's like manifest destiny in reverse. Just kind of came to you, right?
Yeah.
You, Kaylee.
Yeah, no, I feel like so much of like starting a tech company is really just like, I'm here and I'm doing it, so I guess I'm the right person to do it, right? Like, I don't know, I think a lot of times in like movies and TV show, it seems like everything's falling into place for this person, and they were like the right person at the right time, and they were the only one who could solve this problem. And I don't believe that at all. I think a lot of people could have solved the problem that I'm trying to solve, but when it comes down to it, like, it's really hard to solve this problem, and I am willing to put in the work and willing to put in the effort, and I really, really believe that it needs to be solved. And on that note, my aha moments are a little bit different. They're kind of more silly than anything looking back on them. So this is actually my second like startup attempt. So I had a first one. It didn't really work out super well. Totally okay. You know, you live and you learn. And I started ChattyKathi a little bit after that. And I actually started it in the pandemic. You know, everyone was really, really lonely. My parents live across the country, and my mom and my husband both love basketball. I don't really care about basketball. They were talking to me about basketball in the middle of a pandemic, and I was like, I have nothing to contribute to this conversation. So I decided to build them a little bot that would send them basketball prompts every few days. And it was amazing how much it transformed their relationship. Like, they started talking about so much more than basketball, although they talked a lot about basketball, and they still do. And I'm just like continually amazed by how much that they know. And so I think that was kind of my first aha moment. It wasn't intentional, right? But I was sitting there and I was like listening to how wonderful their conversation was going. And I was like, maybe this could help other people. Like, a lot of people are lonely right now. A lot of people are struggling, but a lot of people have a lot of passions they want to share. So maybe I can build something that helps people with more than just Celtics and Nuggets facts. So that's where we're at now. And yeah, we ask questions, and we have all these different conversation prompts about hundreds of different things, but it really all stemmed from that. And then exactly like you were saying, Ari, it's like, that was a great aha moment. There were a lot of lows, there's a lot of highs, but that is like the wonderful part about being in the position that we are, is those highs are really high, and they really do help you get through those lows.
I don't think that that's a silly aha moment. I think that's amazing.
Thanks.
Also, I harbor those facts about basketball and soccer and every other needless sport. So I relate.
Perfect. Nice.
Ari's just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
That is really awesome. I want to follow up on that too, Kaylee, because ChattyKathi is focused on cultivating and maintaining relationships and social belonging. So what does fostering belonging mean to you?
Yeah. So this actually, my answer to this comes from someone that I work with, actually. We were talking about this exact question, and she just had the most amazing response. And it was basically fostering an environment where someone has the curiosity to ask questions and the vulnerability to answer, which sounds really easy, but it's super hard. To know that you are in a safe space where you can ask people a lot, ask them anything, and they will want to answer to you honestly and openly. And so that's really been the mission of what we've been doing is, talking to friendship psychologists, reading all these relationship books and building this product to try and do that.
And as you mentioned before, it seems like it plays a big part in your company formation too, and how you set a culture. So I'm curious for both ChattyKathi and OpenField, how belonging and creating a good environment, especially as I know a lot of us are coming out of the political landscape, which isn't exactly known for the healthiest work environment. So how do you try to challenge that in how you form your own company?
I will start on part of that. I know, yeah, Ari and I both have been, I guess, living that like either startup or like at our previous startup that we met at and political campaign life for, Ari for what, 20 years. And it is, I will not say that her and I have done a really good job of creating healthy boundaries around like our work time, because we work all day, every day. We don't really take days off. I think that's part of just what is natural when you're starting a company. Like you are the people. And so we're doing that. But I think that for us, now that we're getting to the point where we have other people coming on that we are maybe not like friends with or familiar with as working people, but now they're coming into our organization, is that like we hold the boundary, and we, because Ari and I have been friends and we know each other and work together so well, we see each other as like human beings first, and how do you cultivate the best work environment for ourselves, and then we kind of have to take that out another layer of, okay, we're not ever going to be the people where you need to sit at your desk 9 to 5, because that is just not realistic and it's not how people work. And so I think the fact that we are very open and honest with each other, and we try to be as open and honest as we can with people who work with us and for us, and who we're in partnership with, is just cultivating like human beings and like relationship and not just output. And so hoping that they also feel that in return, so that we can kind of create that environment of wanting to be open and honest with us, because we are not going to be upset or angry that like, hey, I can't come to this meeting because I'm just having either a really bad morning or something came up. Like we had an investor's newborn join us in a meeting yesterday. Like that's totally fine. And I think that especially coming out of, we're still living in the pandemic, treating each other kindly, I think is like first and foremost, because while we are all home and at our desks, it does not mean that like we can sit down and work all day. It's just not realistic. And so I think, right, puppies join us. So I think that just like treating each other as human beings first and foremost, and Ari and I have cultivated that with each other, and to kind of grow that out as the organization grows. And I don't know how many employees ChattyKathi has, but we are still like a very small team. So being mindful of how we grow is really important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're small too. So I definitely understand that. I think, I think like I found myself, it sounds like really similar to you all. Like I found that I was telling, we don't have a super big team, but even in that kind of small team, I was telling other people to take breaks. I was telling other people, you will do a better job if you take care of yourself. You will do a better job for us if you go to that noon yoga class. If you tell me that you just need an afternoon to go on a hike. I was telling other people that, and then I was working like 12 hours a day and I wasn't giving myself that flexibility. And I know that this is the type of person that I am. And oftentimes I do this, and then I crash. And then I come up and I do it and I do it and I do it and I crash. And that's not healthy and that's not sustainable. And so something that I am trying to remember more and more as we continue to grow is how important it is to lead by example when you're founding a company. And if you want people to take those breaks because you genuinely believe they will do a better job, you have to take them too, or people are just going to do what you do, regardless of what you tell them you think is healthier. And that's honestly so much harder than just putting your headphones on and coding for 12 hours a day. Like that is easy to me. Like that is where I am comfortable. It is so much harder to recognize when I'm hitting that block and I need to go for a walk, or I need to make myself a snack, or I need to play with my dogs. And so that's something that I'm like continuing to work on, and I'm sure will be a struggle for a long time, but I hope to get much better at.
Yeah, I have like a confluence of disabilities, which is also like really interesting because like founder culture is very much like healthy white cis bro, right? Stands in front of a room and is like can do power, like can be Jack Dorsey, right? And like just do all these like wellness retreats and stuff. And I'm not that dude, right? Like I'm a sober alcoholic and I got to go to meetings and I'm like a night owl and like all sorts of things that mean that, you know, I'm not going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do a silence retreat and then go ride my Peloton and then be on meetings, right? And being like peak performance, because that is just not healthy for me, right? And by trying to be radically honest about my own humanity, right? It's made me a much better manager, right? Over the years, right? Before OpenField and currently. And so like, I have devs who are happy and thrilled to work for me because I am very flexible and I am not micromanaging. And I just please send me your code, right? Like may it be the thing I asked you to write it about, right? But like, am curious about what other people think, want folks to learn and stretch as a part of what they're doing, but not to break themselves, right? And to also be honest about like, hey guys, like I have a migraine because I get chronic migraines. So like, you know, I have days where I can like work for 12 hours in a row. And then I have like days where I'm like, there's nothing, I can't even write this email. It's not going to happen. And being able to be both radically honest with myself about what those things are for me, but also supportive of other people being people, right, with their own complexities and their own rhythms, including the folks who are hard 9-to-5ers, right, which solidarity and bless you to you. If you are one of those people, is I think for me at least, it's the thing that like that combined with our mission makes us a really great place to work, right? Because if you can have dignity at work, like our friends in labor organize for, then there's a lot of other things that make your life worth living that become possible because you aren't carrying work with you when you're done.
Yeah, Ari, you said something really interesting. You kind of mentioned the term like peak performance and kind of then went on to kind of say like what you're doing is not that, but what you just described is your peak performance. Like that is how you work best. And that's how like the world is going to get the most out of you. So I totally agree that, yeah, giving people that flexibility and whatever you need, that's how you're going to build a good company. And that's how you're going to get the most out of everyone as well.
Had many conversations with my therapist about that. They're like, don't feel guilty for how you work well. It is okay. Yeah. If that is how you work well, then lean into that and don't expect yourself to do the 9-to-5, sit down at the desk. But as long as you, so that's why it's more of the like, are you getting your work done? Are you responsive when we need you to be is more important than like hours clocked in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, our operations manager, Mare, just led us through this amazing session about work-life integration versus work-life balance, because the idea of balance is they're in opposition to each other. And in the modern workplace and like with how we actually function as human beings, your work and your life are pretty integrated with each other, especially if you are fortunate enough to be able to work on something that you're really interested in and passionate about. Like sometimes you wake up with inspiration in the middle of the night and want to go write it down or work on that code. So finding ways to healthily integrate in your life is really important. And I think this brings us to another question too about diversity and representation in leadership, because historically leadership has been white and cis and male, and we're seeing more diverse representation, more diverse folks in positions of leadership, and that really changes work cultures. I think because there's a different perspective on life and how an organization can be run and how people should be supported. So especially with the context of our panel today, I'd love to hear from each of you on what you think makes women and non-binary folks natural leaders when it comes to the intersection of innovation, human interaction, and technology.
I can jump in here with an opinion of mine. Oh, actually, I see you, Kaylee. Do you want to go first?
No, go for it.
Actually, this is actually demonstrative of actually what I'm about to say. I think that folks with marginalized identities have a tendency, by definition, it's a survival mechanic. You have to be way more plugged in and attuned to what's going around you if you're going to make it through life safely. Like you have to. And so we have a tendency to be better listeners, because our literal like life depends on our ability to be attuned to what's happening around the people that are around us. What do they need? What are they saying? What's underneath the thing they're saying, right? And so all of that mindfulness, right, actually, I think becomes an asset when you're creating spaces and environments that people both want to work in, but also when you're building products and teams and managing folks. I will say one thing though that feels really important to say about like, and I think it's a very apt conversation, particularly now, is like, it is absolutely possible for those of us with marginalized identities to replicate the systems of oppression we've experienced. And it's actually sometimes like much harder for us to clock or to hold accountability around that, when it's more like Elizabeth Holmes is a great example of that, right? Of like an incredibly toxic manager, like outside of everything else, just a bad manager, right? But like got a pass on it in a way, right? Because of holding an identity. And so I think that it is one of those things that you have to be in simultaneity and mindful of. And I think that's also why accountability processes, including building accountability between you and your co-founder, right? Between you and your board, between you and your investors, your advisors, your community, your early customers, is actually really, really key. Because like ideally you create a culture where folks can give you feedback about like, oops, ouch, like intentions, and those flags can be raised early, rather than you're way down the pike, right? And then it feels really intense to be getting feedback from someone because you're not in just relationship with them to start. And so I think by fostering those things, which I've noticed we have a pattern of doing more often, again, because of the survival mechanic, but is also critically important, right? Because you can't just hold a stance or assume that we're going to be better at it. It's actually really important to be really intentional and mindful about like, how are you living into the promise of that stance?
Yes, sorry, I didn't know if Emily, you wanted to go.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot there. And thank you so much, Ari, for sharing everything that you did. I think that part of it, I completely agree. So much of, I think, being a good tech founder is just the ability to listen. Because people will tell you what you need to fix. And they will tell you very, very bluntly sometimes, but still it's really easy not to hear it because you want it to work so badly, because you've just spent 24 hours writing this code that you're like, this has to be the solution. And I think the ability to listen is one of those skills that's really, really, really underrated. I mean, there's a lot in our culture right now that asks you to scream about everything, scream about who you are, scream about what you believe in, which are wonderful things to be able to hopefully live in a world where you can share that. But at the same time, being able to listen is just so incredibly important. And listen and be able to take advice and listen to criticism, but it doesn't mean you always have to do it, you know? And I think that's sometimes where women and others can struggle, is we hear things and we're like, well, this person is telling me this is what needs to be fixed. And they might not know my product as well as I do. They might not know X, Y, and Z as well as I do, but it's a criticism. So I need to fix it. And sometimes it just takes a step back to recognize like, no, I've worked super hard. Like this was really great advice. It doesn't necessarily mean that I need to make this change. Maybe they don't understand yet. Maybe they don't understand something about me. Maybe they don't understand something about what I'm building. And then it's your job to convince them, and it's your job to tell them, which is honestly sometimes where I can struggle, is to find that confidence.
Yeah, I echo all of those things. So I think a big piece of it is, and I don't want to stereotype all women, but like we generally speaking are like, because we do have to be so aware of our surroundings, like Ari was saying, and we are kind of hyper vigilant. And I don't think we all like, the conversation is more prevalent now, but because this is just how we lived our entire lives, we don't know any different to how vigilant we need to be and how, I guess, like stressed we are all the time, because like even walking down the street, like you have to be so aware of what's going on. in your own life, that like we generally are a little bit more like empathetic and open to listening. And I think that that is something that is really useful when you're building something and in conversation with customers and trying to figure out like needs. I think the second piece of it comes from, and this is more of like a technical like business aspect of it, is that because especially in like raising money and presenting your business as a business, we have to be so much more on point with facts and numbers and like just so dialed in instead of just bringing some grand idea. And I say that we got our first check on a grand idea, but obviously since then, we have to be ultra prepared to sound like we know an ounce of what we're talking about. Even as like Ari and I have been doing this for years. And so I think that even just on a like what we know is expected of us is so different than generally like what like the white male traditional like tech founder has to experience. There's a reason why generally like female-led businesses give you better returns and are actually like a better business investment. And it's because we have to be so much more on point. And so I think the aspect of like being listeners and empathetic to also taking that to the business side of it and just having to have everything so dialed in kind of gives us actually like, as much as the disadvantage of it is like trying to raise money and be taken seriously, we know our businesses and our markets and our numbers, I think, even better because we have to.
Yeah, Emily, I definitely agree. It's interesting. My co-founder, Erica, and I actually talk more about how we need to move away from the numbers a little bit and be able to share the bigger story and the emotion behind it. And I think we're a little scared to do that sometimes because women are often told like, you can't, don't lead with emotion. Women are like too emotional. And so we know if we tell people, we think if we tell people like, these are the numbers, these are the projections, this is everything we have planned, that is the side of the story that we need to tell. Because, and to be honest, I think in my mind, it's like, because I am going to go against a stereotype. But when it comes down to it, to build a business, it's not just the numbers, right? It's also, why are you doing this? Why do you care so much about this? Like, what is the emotion behind it? And being able to share that openly is really tough, knowing that there are all those stereotypes.
We are finding that balance as we go. So yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah. And I'd love to actually like get a little bit more specific into that too. What has that process of raising capital looked like for each of you?
Yeah, I guess I can start. So like I said, Ari and I got our first kind of small seed check, pre-seed, pre-idea, almost 3 years ago at this point, which is crazy. 2.5 years ago. And so that, I don't want to say it felt easy, but that was kind of our first check, got us into a network with HGL that really, I think for us was kind of the basis of like our kind of ramping up into how we fundraise from there. And so for us, I think we had a slightly, I don't want to say easier path to our first couple checks, just because we were in network and in a group of folks who believed in us. And so we were able to leverage that network to get kind of our first checks. And since then, going into the pandemic, we were supposed to launch, like literally like the day Los Angeles shut down. So having to pivot from there. And then once you are 2 years in, you're taken from that like idea stage of like, we see your potential to, okay, now let's back it up with numbers. And like, we survived the pandemic, we're doing well. But people just expect something different from you this next time around. And so we're dealing with, we're kind of like in the middle of our raise right now. We're like 70% done with our current raise. And we are actually coming from the two prong of like 2 female founders, as well as people viewing us as just a political tool, which is a totally different lens of how like traditional VCs see us. So now moving outside of kind of that impact investor world where we had been, to talking to more quote unquote traditional VCs. it's been a different conversation completely. I don't want to say difficult because we've been raising money, but it is definitely a more difficult transition, and learning how we talk about ourselves, as a business, how we talk about ourselves as founders, and like what is behind the numbers. And so, it feels like you're in that kind of in the weeds of your business. You don't know how well you're actually doing because you're just in it, and it feels like slow progress sometimes. And I think that for Ari and I, we didn't have this realization until like this last September, where we met up with one of our founders or one of our investors from New Media Ventures. I don't know, Becca, if you know that team. And Jess was like, let me see your numbers. Like, you guys have monthly revenue. This is your ARR. She's like, no, you guys are actually just like a good business. At this stage of where you are as a SaaS product, you're just a good business. You're not a good business for the political market or any of that, but you're just a good business. And I think that was like our first like realization of like, oh, okay, this is kind of a different conversation for us. But it's definitely been hard to kind of see that, and then seeing kind of, right, these businesses that raise $100 million and have $600,000 in revenue, but like we are hoping to finish our raise of $1 million, and it feels like a struggle to do that when our numbers bear out that we shouldn't have a problem doing that. And so I think that those combinations and the way that we talk about ourselves, it's hard. And I think it's also inherently hard and weird to go ask for money. And that's just like not a fun conversation to like get on a phone knowing like I can't believe I'm about to ask you for $300,000. Like, that sounds outrageous to me, but it shouldn't. So we just actually went through an accelerator in Seattle called Graham & Walker Female Founders Fund that really kind of was the first time we've just been in audience with just other female founders, which changed a lot of like how we feel about ourselves as founders, about our business, about being able to be like in concert with other female founders, being comfortable there. And just having them really have like our back and be like, this is not outrageous. You guys are a good business. Like, believe in yourselves more. It's just been a journey, but it's definitely, it's hard. It's definitely hard.
Yeah, it's super hard. I think Emily, a lot of kind of what I heard you say is kind of that struggle in the transition from like, this is a little thing that I've built and maybe it's going to work, to like, oh no, this is a thing now and it's working and people are using it. And I need to start talking about it differently, because in the back of your mind, like, you remember that first day, like you remember that, like, creating the GitHub repo, and being like, wait, seriously, like, this is worth money now? Like, this is like I built this. And that transition is so hard. I think my co-founder and I probably spent like a week straight talking about how we needed to talk about our business differently, and how we needed to get rid of a lot of the assumptions that we had. We needed to get rid of a lot of that doubt. And the only way that other people were going to start really believing in it is if we did, and if we talked about it in a different way. And that is just such a hard transition. And since we're very small too, I'm sure down the pipeline there's another transition of hopefully, like we do have $1 million in ARR. Like, that is insane. And you kind of have to like hide that, and maybe hide, like, you don't ever want to sound surprised, because of course you're not, but everything that goes into it, all the ups and downs, all the points where it could have fallen apart. And knowing that you still got through it, and that it's an incredible piece of technology that you've built, is something that is just a continual, I'm sure I'm going to keep learning. And it is such a cool process. Yeah. We did funding a little bit differently. I'm really, really lucky in that. So I transitioned into software development from a literature degree. And once I did that, went to a coding boot camp, I then put my husband through coding school. And so when I decided to start a company, he was like, don't worry about like getting a paying job, just like do what you love and it'll all work out. And so my co-founder and I have not raised a whole bunch of money. We've pretty much bootstrapped a lot of it. We're doing a small friends and family round now. And I think about that decision a lot. And honestly, I think a lot of it was based around kind of a lack of self-confidence at the time. Because when I decided to become a founder, I had just gone through a kind of awful experience that really professionally lowered my self-confidence. And so I almost used ChattyKathi as a tool to convince myself that I could do it. And like a lot of days I woke up and I was like, you know what, maybe I'm stuck on a problem. There's no one else to solve it. Like I have to figure out how to solve it. And then little by little, I built up that confidence. And now I think we're at a point where, we're starting to raise a little bit of money. And going back, I wouldn't have done it differently, other than maybe probably wishing I believed in myself a little bit more, which I'm sure all of us on this call can say that there are times where we wish we believed in ourselves a little bit more.
And I want to ask a bit more about this too, especially I think there are probably some people on the call who are thinking about like, could I be a founder one day? Or what does that process look like? And what do I need to do to get there and like build that confidence? And it's kind of funny to me too, Emily and Ari, that you say at Higher Ground Labs, when you got that initial investment, that, it was just an idea at that point, because being in the same room as you in 2019, I was like, wow, they are set. They're the most confident, like awesome founders. I was in awe. I just thought it was amazing. So would love to hear from each of you of what are some ways that you've built confidence? What are some support beams that you've put into your life, or ways that maybe you didn't expect to get support and it's made a big difference for you? And even if you have recommendations for future founders where they might be able to start building up that support as well.
Yeah, I can start.
Also, thank you, Becca, because we were winging it.
So scared, we're terrified. But the benefit also, to be fair, Higher Ground Labs was kind of biased in our favor because it was really set for folks who are coming from outside of the movement, trying to come into the movement to sell to the movement. And for us, we were like, this is baby business school for us, right? So like, it was just like the opposite thing. Like, we got to help folks who already had like millions of dollars of ARR. We used to give them coaching advice because we knew who they were pitching to, because they were like people I taught to code. And I was like, oh, they have this thing and they'll need this thing, and these are their questions. And I was like, yeah. So it has also been like one of the things. I mean, when it comes to confidence, I think really like the thing that's hardest, right? My ex-husband was wrong about most things, but one of the things he was right about is that I dramatically underestimated how good I already was at something, like every time, right? And it's actually something my fiance also agrees with. It's the only thing they agree on. And so like, for example, I was like, I don't know how to do product research and product design, right? Was a thing I was saying to myself like 6 or 9 months in. And then I read like a bunch of product research, a bunch of product design. I was like, oh, these are organizer one-on-ones. These are debriefs. These are these things. I was like, I already did those things. I was like, and they're like, and this is how you build a product development roadmap. I was like, oh yeah, I did all of those things, and I got feedback, and I just didn't know the words to describe what I was doing, right? So I wouldn't have called it product research when I called every friend I knew who did deep canvassing and was like, tell me about your organizing model and what's broken and wrong with it, right? Like I didn't think about it that way. But that's 100% what that is, right? Like I didn't realize when I built a design and then went back to them and was like, would this solve your problem? I was doing my very first pitches to customers, right? But that's how our 100 organization waitlist got formed, right? Like I didn't realize, right, when I did my first talk about OpenField, I didn't realize that that's like a whole part of marketing, but it is, right? And so like, I think there's a lot, honestly, I think the biggest confidence booster is find someone else who has done the thing you've done, who can stare at you and be like, you're already doing that thing. That thing you're doing, like you need to squat up is basically my biggest like suggestion, because I think the most validating advisor we've found in space so far is this woman named Dr. Michelle Krauss, who founded and exited what is the precursor in our space to like Van, and has spent like 40 years in technology and has like a PhD in computer science and all of these other things. I drank my way out of the University of Texas in classics, right? And spent most of my time knocking doors to pay my rent. But when I talked to her about like, what am I doing? She's like, oh, you have this thing, right? And she's able to articulate to me like what it is, the thing that I'm doing is that like I feel sheepish about, but I'm accidentally minimizing myself because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, even though I do, right? Like I became one of only 100 Black or Latinx women to raise over $1 million in VC funding on Earth without realizing it, right? Like that's wild. First of all, that's so fucked up. I don't know if we're supposed to swear here, but it is, right? It's ridiculous that number is so small, but there's like 100, 200 of us, right? And I'm half Mexican and half Black, so I'm in both lists. So which means there's like, it's like me and like 3 other people who share my exact identities, right, are also on that list. But the fact that it's that small, right, that it's a precinct caucus size of us on Earth is insane, right? But like it is, I think probably if you're thinking about founding something, right, like fear is what's going to get you before anything else. It's like fear is what's going to get you, right? Unless you are Adam Newman, right? You probably are a person with enough humility to where fear is what's going to crack you before any of the rest of it will, before the tech or the servers or the money, right? Any of it. And so I think that's probably my biggest advice is squat up as quick as you can and then find folks who have done what you've done, which is hard, right? It's hard to find those people, but find like mentors and folks you trust enough to be like, I'm a tangled bundle of nerves and terror. And they're like, you're fine. Like that's just called raising your seed round. Move on. Like, and that is actually the thing, because founding a company is an absurd and insane task that basically nothing prepares you for, including getting a fancy MBA, it turns out, right? It's mostly gall that'll get you through.
Yeah, I echo that. I'm not going to speak to like have confidence. I am like the least confident person in this group, probably. I don't even like sending an email to somebody. I'm like, oh no, if I had to CC you on it, I don't want to send it. So I think that I will echo the second part of that is like finding the right team. Like I would have never started a company without a co-founder, right? I sit here now thinking like, I don't know how solo founders do it. Because the time and just, I don't know how you function as a human being. But without having a network and without having people that you can rely on. So as a co-founder, and then also just as like, fortunate to have like family around that are supportive. It is an incredibly lonely place to be, even having a co-founder, even having kind of built out a few people on a team. It is really lonely because it is a really hard, they could have difficult jobs, but it's like a totally different thing when you are the person, right? I remember hiring our first person who was a very like good friend of ours and knew they were taking a pay cut to come work for us and all of these things. But like, even just signing the paperwork to be like, you are now relying on me for a paycheck was like the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. And I hated it. And so it's a lonely place, and there's definitely fear that drives a lot of it. And so I think having the right team around you, and just being like, I know this sounds kind of weird, but just being confident in the idea you had the idea for a reason. The worst thing that's going to happen is that it won't work out. That's okay. That happens every day. But you will never know if you don't try. And so I think if you have an idea and you want to do it, just going for it, but making sure that you have a good team behind you or good people around you who will support you in that journey, even just like mentally, as just like a check-in of like, hey, how are you doing? Is incredibly important. I think we've experienced that as a team together. And then I think even more so in the last few months of being in like just this female founders group that we've been a part of. Having HTL was incredibly useful at that time to be like around other founders. But it was still a mixed company room, right? And so we were with 6 other companies in this last group. So really small cohort. We were the only 2. I think there was maybe one other team that had co-founders. Everyone else just had a solo, or they had only brought in a solo to the accelerator. So there was maybe 10 of us. And we got really close and were able to be like vulnerable and open with each other about the experience of being a female founder, the difficulties that we're going through. And so just having like a good network of people around you is the key to all of it. Like you could be the most confident founder in the world, but if you don't have somebody, as I am the dream killer, right? There's like, yeah, I want to do this thing. And then reality over here saying, we can't do that yet. If you don't have that, I can't, I don't know, like Adam Newman, you're just going to go off and do some crazy stuff. But if you like having kind of a foil and having somebody you can bounce things off of and support you, but also not like just, blindly support you. So we are here for the Adam Newman slander. I'm also like watching We Crashed. So like it's top of mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. You need mentors. You need people who can tell you that you're doing a good job when you don't think you're doing a good job. You need people who will tell you you're not doing a good job when you think you're doing a good job. You need the whole thing. You will find them in weird corners. Sometimes they'll be right in front of you and they will be people that you expected to mentor you, people who you thought were going to be on your side. You'll reach out to some people and they won't be that. And then these people will come out of the woodwork and they will just, you'll really connect with them. And yeah, just don't, I think one of the biggest takeaways I've learned over the last few years is to really just not be afraid of asking for help. I think as founders, we kind of have this like thought that we need to do everything ourselves, and we need to be strong and we need to be confident. But we need to ask for help when we need help. We can't do it all on our own. And you also need to take the time that you need. In between my two startups, when the first one had failed and I wasn't sure what I was going to do, I legitimately watched all of Outlander 2 weeks straight. Like I laid in bed and watched Outlander. I was going to say I'm not proud of it. I'm proud of it. I love that show now. But sometimes being a founder means crushing a lot of work. Sometimes it means lying in bed and watching Outlander. And that's totally okay. It's whatever you need. And just don't think that you need to be this like, I don't know, this like Energizer bunny of like power and ideas and just like pursuit. You're human. And that is the most, as I think the three of us have said, like the most important thing to remember about yourself too.
It's really great advice. And it's amazing too. I think each of you focused a lot on community and having partnership too in your roles. And Ari and Emily, you of course are co-founders. Kaylee, you and your co-founder Erica. I know at Bluebonnet, my co-founders are like some of the most important people in my life. And I lean on them for a lot. And they not only are great business partners and we build a lot together and check each other's assumptions, but they're also really wonderful friends. And it makes work fun. And that's really special. So speaking of squatting up, how did you meet your co-founder and what would you say the key to a healthy and successful co-founder relationship is?
Are you going to tell our origin story or am I?
Like, I don't know. I feel like this is like a wedding toast type thing, right? Like Emily and I met at a company called Nation Builder, actually. And we're paired together to help build a national voter file from scratch and stayed friends, like stayed being people who could rely on each other. And then the next like 2 or 3 jobs that I had, I was like, Emily, are you doing anything? And she was like, no. And I was like, great, I need your help. And so it's actually really interesting because we're so much closer now. We're basically married, like at this point, right? And so like, I think the healthiest advice I ever heard about your co-founder relationship is like, you got to treat it like a marriage. And that means like having real ass conversations about stuff, being like, hey, you disappointed me, right? Like in this way, right? Or like, this was super exciting, but like, these are the things I need from you, right? It means like having hard conversations with each other and also looking out for each other too, right? But like that sort of stuff it is an act of love, right? Like you're birthing a thing into existence together and you have to trust each other. And if you don't, you have the wrong co-founder, bro. Sorry. Like, and so like, that's, I think like the most helpful thing, and Emily and I have joked about this for years, is that at various points in our life, we're like, oh, we are at our couples counseling level of like our relationship, and we should actually get like a marriage counselor to like talk to us about stuff. We've mostly are like, we're fine. We're like actually fine, but it is a joke we tell that's also not totally a joke, right? Because it should be treated like a marriage, I think. And so I know what I'm good at. Emily knows what she's good at. We are good at different things. And so we let each other play to each other's strengths, and occasionally do drag us one another, and both regret it immediately and immensely. I hate doing paperwork. And Emily hates performing. And so like, but we know that about each other, right? And so we let each other live into our strengths.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to add, but yeah, I walked into my first day of work, and it was to sit with Ari and help out on well, it was really just, hey, you guys, we need to build a national voter file. We don't know how, figure it out. So like our first day was actually like, we've been building something the whole time, because we didn't like come in with like task work to do. It was, hey, figure this out. And so we've always had that relationship. And I was joking about calling myself the dream killer, but like it is just like the foil of our relationship of like, hey, Ari has this really great idea, and then I have to be like, oh, but can we do it? Should we do it? What's the business part of it? So we are very good, like we are really good at very different things. We are very different, but like at the end of the day, like we're texting about business, we're also texting about 90 Day Fiance. Like we are actually just like friends. And so it's really helpful for us. We don't live in the same city anymore. I will be seeing her this weekend. But we do have like a really good cadence, and we work very similarly. And so it works out really well for us. Like we can be really candid with each other, as our conversations this week. We've both just had like, difficult weeks. But like we can be honest with each other about that, and like have conversation and be like, hey, I'm working on this. It might take me the rest of the day because I'm just like not having a great day. But we are able to have that kind of communication. And I think without that, I don't know how you run a business together.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I think, yeah, it's like absolutely impossible. Or you run a horrible business and everyone's miserable because you're miserable with the person that you're married to. So, yeah, no, Eric and I talk a lot about being married too. And talk a lot about like Chatty. We call her Cathy. We call her, she has a whole identity. We talk a lot about Cathy being our baby. And sometimes your baby needs different things from each of you. Sometimes one of the parents is like, I can't do this, I need a day. And the other parent's like, don't worry, I got you. And you just balance each other out. My co-founder and I met. She's actually like loosely related to me through my husband. She's like my husband's second cousin. She happened to move to Denver. She has a totally different background than me. So I've pretty much exclusively worked in tech since I graduated college. She used to run film festivals. She ran parts of the Sundance Film Festival. So we came into this from very, very different backgrounds. We had never worked together. We had to learn a lot about each other really quickly. And I think in the beginning, it's kind of like when you're dating someone, right? You don't want to like, you go on your first few dates, you want to be super positive. Like you just tell them how awesome they are. You tell them how awesome and there's a lot of positivity, right? And then you have that first big, like, ooh, things are not going well. Like, how do we have this conversation? And you put it off and you put it off and you put it off. Like this is what you do in relationships, right? And then, but being able to have those conversations, I mean, she and I have had a lot of conversations where we will just like cry about like things that are happening or things we accidentally said to each other that have made each other feel horrible. And then we talk about why, and it turns out we're both worried about the same things and we both have the same, yeah, it's funny how when you really do kind of, you're able to be vulnerable with someone, how similar you end up being, even if you come from different backgrounds, have different skill sets. And so I think that, yeah, just being open is so important, and just accepting that you're married is like a big thing too. Like, don't think about it like it's anything else. Like it's the two of you, it's the two of you against the world, So.
Yes. And I think something that was important, and I will say, because I was probably on the receiving end of it at some point, was like, we're all going to mess something up at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's okay. But like, it's going to happen, and like, don't be scared of it. Right. Yeah. Like I messed something up. It's going to happen. Like someone's going to say the wrong thing, send the wrong email, not pay a bit. Like there's just something that will fall through the cracks or get messed up.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like, we're humans, it's life, like it's going to happen, but like as long as we have each other's back and we're in it together, then like we'll get through it and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all humans. I think like when we start this founder journey, like we hope that we're going to be the exception and that like everything will go perfectly, and it never does. And just like accepting that and knowing that it's more important to figure out how to get through things together than it is to do things perfectly is like the most important thing. I was just talking with my team today about how important just like iterations are. I was like, I don't care if we get things right the first time or not. I just don't care. What I care is that we don't shut down, like personally shut down. Also the company shut down, but like personally shut down. And we just keep iterating on it and we learn and we keep making it better and better. And it's interesting how big that switch has been. I don't know if you all have kind of experienced that, but a lot of people really do. We're kind of conditioned to like, be like, we need to get it right the first time. And kind of convincing people that like, it's okay. It's okay. Let's figure it out together. Has been really interesting in just how big of a context switch that's been for a lot of people that I've been working with.
And I will say, like, this is going to be unrelated. Sorry, Ari, but like in terms of the like thinking things have to be perfect, and this would be like founder advice, it doesn't. Ship it. Like, get it out into the world. I think that one of the mistakes that Ari and I made was thinking something had to be perfect before we let other people see it. And that's just like not realistic, because even if we think it's perfect, there's going to be something that breaks, there's going to be something that somebody wants differently, and so doing that, like knowing there's going to be iterations, as long as you're honest about it, and you have like, we are lucky that our pretty big chunk of our initial customers are, I wouldn't say like friends, but like family, they're friends, like they're customers, right? They're like the working families party, but they're people that we can actually have conversation with as a customer. And like, we were pretty intentional about that, because we know things are going to break. We know things are going to get messy. But can we be honest with you about it? Can we have like conversation? And so like iterations are fine. And so even just not as like people working in the business, but just like as a product, don't think something has to be perfect, because you're going to be changing it constantly. You're going to be updating it constantly. Just like get it out, and let people break it and play with it for you.
Yeah.
So
things are just going to break. Sorry, go ahead, Ari.
No, it's okay. I was going to say like second that advice and hire a fucking QA engineer. Dear God, worth your weight in gold. Like, yes, fuck it, ship it, and hire a QA person and pay them well. Like, the best decision I've ever made in my whole life. So, like, I was like, devs, I need devs. And I was like, I need someone to manage the border collie for your sheep is your QA people. So
yeah. Yep. Or else you end up being the QA. And the problem with that is everything that you're building is an extension of your brain. So you don't see the things that are going to break. Like you wouldn't even think of doing things that like a QA engineer or a really good dev would do. And so, yeah, just different perspectives are always so important.
This is really amazing. And I want to make sure we open up too for audience questions. So if you do have a question, go ahead and use the raise hand feature, or you can drop it in the chat and either read it or we'll read it for you. To ask another question as people get prepared to ask theirs, I'm actually really curious about that technical development side and the engineering team that you build and everything. What are some lessons that you've learned in the development of your technology, and where do you see really the future of your own tools and technology heading, especially with really everything going on in the space having to do with data privacy and inclusive design of technology, and how do you see yourself fitting into that piece?
I can start because Kaylee's also a dev. Dude, hiring devs is like one of the best and hardest things. Hire people who are better at doing code than you. Like it feels crazy and it feels a little backwards because you're like, how am I going to manage people who have more dev experience than me? But that's what they're there for, right? Like hire folks. And like one of the best things I ever did was hire a dev with twice as much coding experience than I had. And I just handed him the gnarliest bugs I had. And it's like one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Right. And then it's like actually cool to shore up more junior folks after that who can like churn out things like API integrations, right? And stuff like that. That does need like a lot of hands-on coaching and management, but it's not like this is the most insanely difficult thing I've ever had to deal with, and I have no idea how to fix it. And when I look at this bug, it makes me cry, right? And so I think honestly, the biggest suggestion I have around like thinking about development is like hire people who are better than you are and be very comfortable with that and take their advice and ask them like, what else should I set up? Because I built an entire dev environment around what worked for me. But like, I still write all of my scripts, including training my machine learning in the shell, right? That is apparently an insane way to live. It's the way that works for me, right?
Yeah,
But
it's
like,
pretty insane.
it's pretty crazy, but like it's way it works for me, right? And like also most of my shit works, right? So like that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
It's a crazy way to live, but like as I've gotten more devs on board, right? I've built more infrastructure for them based on what they've been like, hey, what about this? What about that? Right. I think the other thing is that as we are evolving, right, the terrain is radically different than it was when we started, right? Like the world is different than when we started the company. And so we had people from our first day pushing us to go in a direction we did not want to go in because we're like, that's insane and that's impossible and you'll die on that hill. It's like going up Mount Everest without a jacket. You're ridiculous. And now instead, right, we're in a place where it's like, not only is it clearly the place we're going, but it's also clearly the right thing for us to do because it's very clear that there's a need for it. And again, if we aren't the ones to do it, no one else is going to do it the way that we would approach it, right? And the way that our customers are asking us to approach it, right? And so I think actually whenever thinking about things like product design or your roadmap or where are you going, right? Like the biggest thing to think about is like, can you listen, right? And be in acceptance about what you're not as good at, because as we're growing and we're hiring more folks, I'm getting further and further away from writing code every day. And that's like terrifying, but also like good, right? And so that's, I think, probably the biggest thing as your stuff evolves, right? Is just get more and more acceptance that different people are going to do it differently than you. And in some ways, the thing you want is to be pleasantly surprised by how well they do it each time they do, right? That's what you're aiming for. And everything else is just ego at a certain point, because I can't be the CEO and CTO forever. Like that was never meant to be the plan.
It's really funny, Ari, that you mentioned ego at the very end, because that is like exactly what I was going to say. I was just going to say you need to get rid of your ego. When I had my first startup, I had not gotten rid of my ego. And I was like, I'm going to build everything myself. I'm using Kotlin. I'm using Docker. I'm using Kubernetes. I'm like going to do with all the SSL certificates myself. And it was miserable. It took me so long to do everything. And there were pre-built solutions, and they were built way better than I could have built them. So this product is built on top of GCP using Firebase, which has a ton of pre-built things. It's way more secure. It's way easier to manage. I can like sleep at night without wondering about a million. I mean, I still worry about things breaking, but I at least know it's built on top of something that has honestly smarter people behind it than I am. And that's like one of the biggest pieces of founder advice that often people give is like hire people that are smarter than you, work with people who are smarter than you. And it's one of those, I think it like sounds cheesy, but it's super, super true. In addition, I think like hire people, especially at the stage that if you're small and you're hoping to grow, hire people that want to learn. When I hired my first engineer, I actually didn't care at all about their like and their background, what languages they knew. I pretty much looked for the term like, I am so excited about this. I am so excited to continue learning. That is why I want this job. And when I found someone who that was their number one driver, I hired them, which was the right decision for me at the time. It's not always going to be the right decision, but in a rapidly growing startup, that's what you want, because new things are thrown at you all the time. And like Ari said, you don't want to be the CEO and the CTO forever. You want someone who either has those skills already or is really, really, really excited to learn them.
Ari built our tech team, so I'm just going to leave it at that.
That's really great. I'd also love to, well, actually, I'll pause again. Are there any audience questions? Awesome. I see one from Christina. Do you want to read it?
Oh, I had two questions back to back. I'm a plethora of great ideas. So, one, what advice would you give your younger self? And two, what is your most life-giving meal? And it doesn't have to be healthy. It doesn't really have to fall under any category. Just what's like straight up serotonin. Thank you. That is it from me.
Great questions.
I can answer the life-giving meal, and it's really more of the idea around the life-giving meal, and Ari's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. We started the company living in LA. I'm now in Seattle, Ari's in Oakland. But any retreat that we've had together, which this will happen this weekend, anytime we've gotten together or where we're just like, we're going to celebrate something, for some reason, our default is Cheesecake Factory. And like, I don't know why. Like, it's just, I'm not saying like, oh, this is the best meal I've ever had. No, it just, there's just meaning behind it. And so I will say, for me in this moment, it's not my favorite like food I've ever eaten, but there is just a lot of there. And so I will say Cheesecake Factory for Team OpenField is like, it's always going to be a thing. And it just is what has kind of like randomly been the thing we navigate to, mostly because like they're open and people can eat whatever they want. And so,
sorry, but my follow-up to the Cheesecake Factory answer would then be, is the favorite appetizer then the Thai lettuce wraps?
maybe that's going to be this weekend. I just always get what I call a trashy salad, because it's like, I know I'm eating 2,000 calories and it's a salad. I don't care. That's not the point. But I always order just monstrous trashy salads, as I call them. So yeah, I'm going with that one.
And I can answer your question about appetizers. I'm a chaos agent of appetizers, which means I get their crazy sampler thing. That's just like everything on earth. And when you open it, you're like, I don't even remember what this was. Like, yes. So that's our thing. My most life-giving meal is definitely, my partner makes egg sandwiches. It's like very simple. It's like bacon, egg, cheese. Beautiful and gorgeous. On sourdough toast now that we live in the Bay. Which is lovely. And like, in terms of advice I would give my younger self, comment your code better, bro. Like, just comment it like a bit better. Like, you know, by that I mean, like, I wrote like weird spells and incantations into my code documentation at various stages, right? I love that Kaylee is nodding. This is deeply validating that there's like so much witchcraft embedded in my code. And it would have been helpful because I still have devs who come on board and are like, so this code has a note on it that says someone should rewrite this that doesn't hate JavaScript. Is that has to be you, right? Like it works. I don't understand what's wrong with it though. And I was like, I don't even know. There's nothing wrong with it. It just looks hideous. And so like, I think that would be my advice to my younger self, is like, comment your code and also get it out into the field faster. Like, those are the two things. Like, get it out into the field faster, as fast as you can, and then like watch people use it, which is my least favorite thing about the pandemic, is I've basically not been able to watch anyone use my product in the field, even though like I power like thousands of door knocks every day. Yeah. What about you, Kaylee? We kind of got messy and sloppy in OpenField about here, but
well, no, I mean, I'm really grateful to know about your appetizer choices, but like, do you also get cheesecake or do you not get cheesecake? I mean, so what kind of cheesecake do you get?
I don't remember.
It's just like whatever at that.
We do like retreats, and like we've done like Palm Springs, San Francisco, where we like just all huddle in a house. And so it's like a cheesecake. I'm gonna eat one slice of cheesecake for 3 days.
Very nice.
I know Becca's like, we've gone off the radar, but
and Emily and I are different people, which means I order 3 cheesecakes. So I have like a cheesecake. Is like
the variety.
Yeah,
that sounds great. I am thinking about cheesecake now. And Emily, maybe, so I just moved to Seattle. Emily, maybe you can give me some good cheesecake. I was going to say, give me some good cheesecake recommendations, but it might just be the Cheesecake Factory, which
Street Meridian 16.
Nice. Yeah, so I think my comfort food changes a lot lately. So like I do eat really healthy, but lately it's been eating like So I discovered the DiGiorno's croissant crust, like frozen pizzas. They are incredible. I bought one, like you're going to the grocery store, you're like, oh, I'm so healthy. Like, I'll just pick up this one thing. And it ended up being a croissant crust pizza, and then like ate a lot of it. It was amazing. It was like way better than it should have been. And then you wake up the next morning and you're like, I'm not going to eat frozen pizza for breakfast. But then you do eat that leftover frozen pizza for breakfast, and it's just exactly what you need. So that's been lately my meal. But yeah. And then in regards to my younger self, I think it's just always just like be nicer to yourself. Like there's like life is really hard. Life is like, no matter what way you cut it, life's really hard. The best thing you can do is surround yourself with wonderful people. Give yourself breaks when you need it, and know that I think as Emily said earlier, it's like the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out and you try something different, right? Like the person you're going to disappoint more than anyone is yourself. Like stop worrying about disappointing people and just be okay with yourself. While you're eating a croissant crust pizza is like a really important lesson to learn.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Does anybody from the audience have anything they'd like to ask? Amazing. It looks like we have a question. Zana, is it? Or Zaina?
Yes, Zaina.
Awesome. Go ahead.
My question was, as someone who's transitioning into coding and data, I'm making a career transition. I wanted to ask, what are some of the things that you look for in a new developer or someone who's transitioning into dev work if we're interested in doing our work, or if we want to make a project, how would we, as someone who's coming in brand new, how can we get people to take ourselves seriously?
Ari, you went like this, which maybe meant like, okay, sorry, you were muted. So I wasn't, if that was just like some fun, fingers or, so I think that, so I do a lot of mentorship with the coding school that I went to, and pretty much the common theme is always people, honestly, really similar to kind of what Ari was saying earlier, in that like, you never quite realize how far you've actually come until you just go out and try it. So I don't know if you're, have you like played around with code and kind of tried a few things, or are you kind of brand new and looking to jump in?
I've played around with code. I have some experience with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and learning SQL because I'm interested in doing data analytics.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, I think the best thing you can do is maybe, I don't know, I think what was really helpful for me is just start a project and just Google a million things. My job is still mostly waking up and Googling a million things. So don't feel like it's not what real engineers do or anything. That's kind of my, yeah, I think that's often what I tell people. What about you, Ari, though?
I'm dropping my email in the chat because thousands of years ago I used to teach people how to code and am actually hiring a dev. But what I look for, like Kaylee said this earlier, is curiosity. Like, are people interested in stretching and learning? Like folks who are like, I would want to give this a try and then figure it out, are people I can work with, versus folks who are like, no, like I don't do this. Like I just gave someone a ton of shit actually because they basically like I asked them to solve a problem and they were like, they touched everything except for the part that involved a form. And I was like, oh, because they were like, think less of front end. This happens a lot. Also, there's a bunch of weird politics among devs around their stuff, right? But like some people don't do front end work, right? And it's like, okay, well, you kind of need to be willing to do like minor stuff, y'all. We're not asking you to build like an entire React SPA by yourself, right? Like that's different. And so I think more than anything, I'm looking for folks who are curious, who have tried to build something, right? Whether it was like a pet project or anything else, because I find that those folks are great. And I'm so glad to hear that you said SQL, because it's actually like really hard to find even backend developers who have any database experience. I actually didn't realize what a unicorn I was until it is still true that I have like the strongest SQL and data analytics and data engineering skills of all of my devs. Because that's what I came from, was data, and then became a full stack developer. And so, yeah, like I think the real thing is to try on a bunch of stuff. Don't say no to any of it initially until you find like, this is my stack, this is my ministry, exactly like building a character in D&D is what I would say. And then, yeah, decide to focus. But I think more than anything, I look for folks who are willing to give things a shot, right? Especially to learn things like, you know, we do geospatial machine learning at OpenField. That's unusual, right? And so I like to let folks learn, and finding folks who are interested in learning and trying something out, as well as are really comfortable doing certain things, is like kind of the magic combination you're looking for.
Yeah. And I will say, like, on the non-technical side of it is finding, I don't know if people are still doing like meetups, but like finding community and like finding groups of like either new devs, meetups, or just other groups that you can be a part of, to find mentors, to find people who you can bounce questions off of. And when you do find a mentor, or multiple mentors, they can also help guide you in like the career side of it, or give you advice, give you recommendations. But finding that group of people, like at the end of the day, it really does come down to, like, for us, having community around like our teams, but finding other like-minded or like new developers who are entering into these like mentor spaces, and finding people that can kind of like be of service to you as well. And mentors are there to help you find jobs, to help you kind of find other resources that you might not already know about. And so I would say seek those groups out as well.
Yeah, really quickly on that note, yeah, 100% agree. I'm pretty involved in an organization called Women Who Code. It's not just for women, it's for anyone, but that is a wonderful resource for mentorship, for just like different tutorials. There's chapters in almost every city. And so I would highly recommend joining there as well.
Thank you, all of you, so much.
Thank you so much for such a great question, Zaina. I think that is a wonderful note to end on. And we want to thank everybody for joining today, and especially thank our panelists for all of the wonderful insights that they've shared. So we will wrap up with each of you sharing where folks can reach you and learn more about your work. On Bluebonnet side, you can learn more about us on our website, bluebonnetdata.org. And we have an Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook where you can connect with us, learn more about the organization and more. And so all of those links are in the chat, but let's, I'll popcorn it over to you, Kaylee, to share a little bit about how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so you can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you just look for my name plus ChattyKathi, you'll get there. And then I will also just type into the chat just how to spell ChattyKathi in case anyone wants to check it out. You can also ping me there. You know, we do have a team, but I answer a lot of customer requests as well, as any good founder does. And yeah, feel free to, I love connecting with people. And if you ever need anything, just shoot me a message. And yeah, excited to hopefully connect with some of you.
Okay, I'll go. So yeah, you can reach out to us at openfield.ai. I'm just Ari at OpenField. You're also welcome to reach out to us on LinkedIn. My current profile is more up to date than our company profile. But yeah, we're happy to talk to anyone who's interested in organizing anyone, anywhere.
Yeah, and I will echo the same thing. I'm just Emily at openfield.ai, either that or on LinkedIn as well. I'm the only Emily Del Beccaro, so you will find me. And same with Ari. She's the only Ari Trujillo Wessler. We are one of a kind. So you can find us on LinkedIn or on our website, which has a link to also contact us via email there. So yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Becca, so much.